One, two.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Hi, a very warm welcome to the 2018 ALC Kings Africa Debates. Just before we start, I'll just give you a bit of background about what today's exercise is all about and how it fits into the work of the African Leadership Center. So the exercise the fellows will do is basically a core part of the African Leadership Center's Peace and Security Fellowship Program. So the simulations are high-level role-play sessions where fellows will debate and act out the roles of key personalities involved in the management of significant security situations in Africa and how it interacts with the rest of the world. So it's an opportunity for our fellows to display their analysis of current affairs from a variety of perspectives, as well as their capacity to critically engage with the public. And these simulations would not be possible without the guidance and expertise of ALC mentor Desmond Davis, who's chairing today's event. A former editor of West African Magazine in London, Desmond Davis, originally from Sierra Leone, has been a journalist and commentator on African affairs for more than 40 years. He is currently London Bureau Chief for the Ghana News Agency and a mentor in strategic communication for political leadership at the ALC. And this exercise is a core part of the training that the fellows receive within the center's flagship programs that have been running for more than 10 years. The Peace and Security Fellowships for African Women and the Peace, Security and Development Fellowships for African Scholars. We also just launched last year the Peace, Security and Development Fellowship for Early Career Young Women and Men. They all offer academic training on leadership, peace, security, and development. And the Women Fellowship Program brings African women at the early stages of their career to undertake their training at the ALC Center in Nairobi. And the Early Career Fellowship Program brings young women and men at the early stages of their career to receive that same training in Nairobi. Whilst the African Scholars brings junior academics to undertake the master's degree in security, leadership, and society here at King's at the ALC. It's basically one aspect of what the ALC does, which is a combination of research, teaching, and the mentoring and training for the next generation of African leaders. And just to mention that the call for the 2018-2019 fellowships are now out. You can start applying online, and there are more details on the leaflets across the room, on our website, and you can also speak to any of us during lunch. This year's fellows are from Morocco, Gambia, Mauritius, and South Africa, and they'll be discussing leadership in Africa, what happens after a despot leaves. We will have two panels, the first on Zimbabwe and the second on the Libya's human slave trade. Before we delve into that action, I would like to thank Dr. Miles Tendi, who's Associate Professor in African Politics at Oxford University, for joining us today. And he will give you some opening remarks which will set the scene for today's scenario for you, the audience, but also for the panel. Thank you. Dr. Miles Tendi.
Thanks everyone for coming. When a despot leaves Zimbabwe and Libya, I'll say a few things. First thing I want to say is situations like this.
It is. Just hold it closer.
Okay. Right. First thing I'll say, I think a situation like this, like these, both Robert Mugabe and Muammar Gaddafi, it's almost 4 decades of rule. And in situations where, long-standing leaders fall, the likes of Shedler and company, tell us, scholars such as him, it's about when alliances within the ruling coalition break up. And the key factor here, I think, is the military. So the choices the military makes in moments like this. In Libya, We saw, because over years, Gaddafi had employed various coup-proofing strategies. At the moment when his regime was under pressure from the protests and international actors, the military basically splintered. He was left with a core unit within the military, but the rest disintegrated. There was mass desertion. Some even joined those who were pressing for the uprising. In the Zimbabwean case, as we saw as well, long pressure, standing pressure on Robert Mugabe to step down. Eventually, the military moved in there too. They sided with the successionists. So I think understanding the choices of the military in moments like this is quite key. And made even more so key because in the literature, when we thought about the Middle East, North Africa, we always assumed the militaries were on the side of the Arab dictators, right? That they were under their control. There was some kind of civilian authority. But I think the Middle East, the Arab Spring really turned that on its head. We were surprised in many ways by the way militaries behaved in ways that were not always consistent with the despot in charge. Same with the Zimbabwean case. If you follow the Zimbabweanist literature, the strongest strand in that literature around civil-military relations was that Mugabe controlled the military. The military was loyal to him. But again, this proved to be false in that situation. So I think choices that militaries make are very key here. But that said, I think the role of the international community is also significant. Regardless of the internal uprisings aside, the fall of Gaddafi would not have been possible without outside intervention, the activities of NATO. So those choices are important too. Robert Mugabe as well, his fall would not have been possible if there had been some kind of international condemnation of the military's behavior. But lo and behold, the West and Africa for once were united against Mugabe. Nobody condemned what went on. So international community is important too, the choices it makes. But where I want to raise something that's important with regards to the behaviors in the international community is around double standards, right? Gaddafi was out in the cold, isolated under sanctions for many years, is brought back in exchange for giving up his nuclear program, finally taking responsibility for the Lockerbie bombings. But a few years later, that same so-called international community that brought him back in turns against him, right? So there are a number of inconsistencies there in policy approaches. And when Gaddafi eventually falls, once again, reminiscent of what had occurred in 2003 with Iraq, again, little thought about what might happen when Gaddafi actually falls. So he goes, but as I talked about the military just disintegrating, so does the state. So you have a domestic situation where there's much strife, very much divided. The east of the country controlled by Khalifa Haftar, and the western side around Tripoli, which is headed by a UN-backed government. But you basically have a state that's splintered. Again, little thought from outside interveners about the day after. This continues to be a problem. Ditto the Zimbabwean case, inconsistencies there too. If you follow Isaka Suarez's work on the African Union as an anti-coup norm entrepreneur, then the African Union, SADC and others should have condemned the military's intervention there. They don't. Inconsistency. The West as well, happy to condemn coups elsewhere in the world, but was silent on this one because it's Robert Mugabe. We've really not liked him for years, so we're happy to see him fall. So those inconsistencies matter too because they undermine the very worth of democracy, right? It looks like a fig leaf for other various agendas. But again, no thought about the day after. Mugabe falls, we're happy for that to happen. And the day after in the Zimbabwe case, what I mean is who's taking over? What you had instead take over in Zimbabwe was the most, if I should say, hard-line element within the ruling regime led by Emerson Mnangagwa and his various supporters in the military. So in many ways, you had even a more hardline element of ZANU take over. We've renewed authoritarianism by our inconsistent interventions and not thinking about what comes after. So I think that's important too, what comes after. And then the last thing I will say is it is for the implications for democracy itself. How do you have a free, fair election as is being proposed in Libya towards the end of this year in a context of internal violence that you find today, the strife, disintegration of the state? How can you stage an election in that context? Doesn't an election actually make the prevailing situation worse? I think that's important to think about. The Zimbabwean case as well, there's pressure for a free and fair election later this year as well. But in a context where there's much fear, a military-backed leadership has taken over, the opposition is in a perilous state. Can you really say you're having a competitive free and fair election, or you're simply legitimizing an authoritarian regime? So I think these are a number of things we ought to bear in mind. Choices of the military, the actions of the so-called international community, not thinking about the day after, the inconsistencies. And then with regards to democracy itself, what the implications are for that. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. I think you managed to grasp the main question that we wanted to kind of focus the theme of today, which is really what happens when there's a leadership transition. Like you said, it's very welcomed, but what happens after? So I think we'll start with our first panel now. I'll just quickly introduce the panelists, our fellows. So playing new president of Zimbabwe, we have our early career fellow, Martha, from South Sudan. Playing Major General Sibiso Moyo is our scholar fellow, Linganadam, from Mauritius. And playing the First Lady, Grace Mugabe, we've got our women fellow, Fatu, from the Gambia.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. For 19 momentous days in November last year, Zimbabweans were pushing for change. After 37 years, President Mugabe stepped down, and we now have a new president. We have a panel here that will look at the issues facing Zimbabwe, starting with President Ernest Mnangagwa, Foreign Minister Sibiso Moyo, and Grace Mugabe, the wife of the former president. We will start with opening statements from President Mnangagwa. Opening statement.
Thank you so much. First of all, on behalf of the ruling party, ZANU-PF, the government, the nation, and on behalf of my family, I would like to sincerely...
Speak up.
Yes, I would like to express my sincere condolences to the family of Morgan Vangarai, who passed on 2 days ago. And in my capacity as the president of Zimbabwe, I would like to thank everybody who stood with us so far until now, beginning with the people of Zimbabwe, my colleagues from the region, SADC, and the AU. I would like to say thank you for the support you've given us so far in making the changes that we've managed to make. Again, I would like to express that during my administration, we endeavor to bring about economic recovery and political reforms that will ensure that human rights and dignity are abided by, the rule of law, separation of powers, safeguarding of the Constitution, and press freedom will be ensured for every Zimbabwean. With these few remarks, I would like to urge the people of Zimbabwe and the people from the region to continue cooperating with us during our term in office until the election period.
Foreign Minister Moyo.
Thank you, Mr. Desmond. I will good morning, everyone. First of all, I will join my president to express my condolences to the family of Mr. Shwangirai and to all Zimbabweans. We are all affected. He was a great man. He helped us build our democracy. I'm very happy to be here with you this morning to speak about the start of a new democracy for Zimbabwe. The new government is working very hard to change the current human security situation in Zimbabwe. We are engaging with the people of Zimbabwe daily in order to set priorities that reflect their most immediate needs. At the same time, we are looking forward to engaging with our neighbors on the African continent and the broader international community to explain that we are opening our doors for mutually beneficial exchanges. My key message to you today is that we cannot improve the past, but we can improve our present and our future. Let's embrace change.
Grace Mugabe, who was fallen from grace.
President Mnangagwa, Mr. Moyo, Mr. Davis, ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted to be in this panel today to discuss pertinent issues pertaining to Zimbabwe. Many decades ago, a revolutionary sacrificed all he had for the love of his country, Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is only Zimbabwe today because of his immense contribution and hard work. This man is no other than my husband, Mr. Robert Mugabe. We cannot overemphasize his contribution to this nation. I have supported him in his endeavors, which has resulted in attacks on my person. I am happy to provide clarity to your questions and concerns. With that, I hope you get a more nuanced view of who Grace Amai Mugabe is, contrary to popular views. Thank you.
Foreign Minister Moyo, we saw changes in South Africa and in Ethiopia the other day. The military never intervened. Why did you intervene in Zimbabwe?
I think we are speaking about different contexts here. In Zimbabwe, the military is a highly respected institution. It plays a very important role in society. We have to underline that at the outset, there was a clique around the president who were inflicting economic and social miseries upon our population. It was a huge human security situation. It's within the mandate of the military to deal with human security situation, and that's what we did when we intervened. At the same time, at the level of the ZANU-PF, the leadership of our former president, Mr. Mugabe, was being contested by many members of the ZANU-PF because his leadership has been hijacked by a clique. Many branches of the ZANU-PF passed motion of no confidence against the former president, and at the same time, they approved the rise of Mr. Mnangagwa as the new leader of the ZANU-PF. And in turn, the changes in the ZANU-PF was reflected in terms of changes in government.
Are you suggesting that ZANU-PF and the army are one and the same? That's what you're saying, more or less.
We are connected. We have a common history. We cannot deny this. We have the same root. The ZANU-PF and the military come from the same root. We come from the liberation struggle. But at the same time, I acknowledge that they are different institutions, but we have similar roots.
President Mnangagwa, how are you going to manage the expectations of Zimbabweans?
Well, first of all, we'll have to acknowledge the fact that We are taking over from a government that has been having a lot of issues regarding administrative measures that were not properly taken in regard to corruption that actually eventually affected the economy of the country. We cannot promise to perform a miracle overnight.
But you were part and parcel of that regime until you were sacked on the 6th of November. When did you make changes then?
Well, everybody performed their role in their capacities. I did my best in my capacity as the vice president.
Grace Mugabe, are you happy with the way your husband was removed from power?
Certainly not. Of course not. I would say that my husband is the best president that Zimbabwe can ever have. And Mr. Mnangagwa and Mr. Moyo here can attest to that. They had served under his administration. At some point, Mr. Mnangagwa himself had actually said good things about him. And I am surprised he's on this panel saying this. Furthermore, this is what I would call treasonable. You wait for the Zimbabwean people to put you in power. You don't take over power unconstitutionally. So these people I would call criminals and are supposed to be paraded in a court of law as of now.
Indeed, for Mr. Moyo, why didn't you go back to the barracks? Why have you taken up a civilian position?
I think that, first of all, we have to understand that the leadership of, at least the hijacked leadership of Mr. Mugabe was contested. We don't deny, and we cannot deny, we actually would like to preserve the legacy of Mr. Mugabe. Mr. Mugabe is a great man. He is a father of the nation, but we could not approve his hijacked leadership. The military had to reassure people. We had to ensure that changes within the ZANU-PF does not lead to violence within in the country. So we had to take action. It was not illegal. How can we say it's illegal when SADC, African Union, and the broader international community has recognized this government? They have welcomed us with open arms. How can we say that this is illegal when the people of Zimbabwe has expressed
that's a very
their approval?
Well, that's a very good point you have made. So what you're saying, there might be good coups in Africa and bad coups in Africa. The bad coups will be resisted, the good coups will be supported.
Is
that what you suggest?
It is definitely not a coup d'etat. Rather, we can call this a military-assisted transition.
Grace Mugabe, can you tell us a bit about the G40 that has caused all the problems within ZANU-PF?
The G40 was actually promulgated to bring in more Zimbabwean youth on the forefront of politics. We realized that youth come with very high creativeness and innovativeness, and we need them in ZANU-PF. And so we were trying to pave the way and avail them opportunities to fully recognize their potentials as Zimbabwean youth.
Indeed, President Mnangagwa, that's what Grace Mugabe is saying. I mean, there are too many old people within the ZANU-PF top leadership. Why didn't you then encourage the G40 to bring in younger Zimbabweans who can now gain leadership skills for the future?
Well, we gave them the space to operate. And we did not fight them at any point until they started creating chaos within the ZANU-PF.
In what way?
Well, right before the transition, there was chaos. Actually, the former First Lady over here can attest to it. She had the backing of the G40 to take over power from
Grace Mugabe, is that true?
I wouldn't agree with that statement. That is not factual. If I had wanted to take over power, I know the right means to take. I wouldn't take the path that they have taken. because actually they belong in the barracks. And for any president to be elected in Zimbabwe, it has to go through constitutional means, and that is through the ballot box, and that is not what they have done.
Ladies and gentlemen, please feel free to ask questions. Say who you are and where you're from. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Peter Ndlovu, a former footballer, and my question goes to Amai Grace Mugabe. There were accusations that you poisoned Comrade Emerson Mnangagwa with the ice cream from your farm. Can you please confirm or deny?
Can you repeat the question?
There are allegations that
you poisoned
President Mnangagwa with the ice cream from your dairy farm. Can you please confirm or deny?
Sir, you answered your question. Allegations, they are mere allegations and not backed up with evidence. And this is not the right forum. This is not a court of law where I have to answer to allegations. So where I have charges against my person, I would gladly go and answer, and my lawyers will defend me.
But talking about...
And additionally, I have no reason to poison Mr. Mnangagwa. Why should I poison him? I'm the wife of the president. I'm the first lady. I don't need to poison Mr. Mnangagwa.
What about, talking about farms, I'm told that you got extensive farm holding in Zimbabwe, which you got because of your position as first lady. Can you please explain that?
Again, that is highly unfactual and not backed up with any evidence. These are naysayers just trying to attack my person.
There's a situation now whereby farm holders have taken you to court to regain their farm.
I have been an entrepreneur for over 20 years. I've been rearing chickens, so I do have humble background, and I've been working hard. In fact, you should be actually commending me. I started from very humble background, rearing chickens and rising through the ranks.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. My name is Margaret Kulikuli. We have watched you in civil society rise from those very humble ranks. Madam, as humble as the way you recently got a PhD, did you write that PhD thesis yourself, or who wrote it for you? And what actually is the title of the PhD thesis again? Do you remember? Can you give us an abstract of the thesis? You should be ashamed of yourself, madam, for plagiarizing things, for collecting titles, and for amassing all those privileges at the expense of your people. Shame on you.
Thank you very much, Miss Margaret. I would be happy to... Margaret Kulikuli, thank you very much. I would be happy to address that question. The thesis is actually online, and I invite you to take a look at this thesis and dissertation. The title, I did write it, and it was approved. I am inviting you by the University of Zimbabwe. I invite you to take a look at that thesis, the role of the changing family in Zimbabwe. Comparative case studies.
Thank you. President Mnangagwa.
Excuse me, who examined you?
I didn't get that.
Who examined you, madam?
One of the professors in the University of Zimbabwe. And again, this is not a forum where my thesis is on a topic.
Okay.
We are discussing Zimbabwe, not my thesis. And I again invite you to take a look at this thesis.
Okay, let's put that aside. Can you explain your love for expensive Gucci wristwatches and other things? And are you aware that you're actually being called Gucci Grace or Disgrace or whatever?
Thank you again for that question, and I am happy to address it because it's
long
overdue. As you can see, I am African in all its facets. I'm wearing African from top to down. I don't wear Gucci. There was one time I entered a Harrod shop and I was buying almond nuts. And this is where this allegation has grown from. And I look after my health. I am a designer. I design my own clothes and I tie my own hair tie. So I totally refute that allegation on my person.
Yes. Yes.
Good morning, and thank you to this panel. My question goes to President Mnangagwa and Minister of Foreign Affairs. The two of you have been well connected to allegations of involvement in diamond mining or diamond theft in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Please, can you comment on these allegations? And one more question for the President. You have been heard all across the world saying Zimbabwe is open for business. How can you assure the Zimbabwean people that this business that you are open for is not merely a return to white minority capital in Zimbabwe? Thank you.
President Mnangagwa.
Thank you. About the statement of us being open to the world for investment, we're not just saying it, we're actually doing something about it. We've put in place legislative reforms on some of the policies that first chase people away from investing. We're now bringing attractive policies to make sure that the rights of those who come into Zimbabwe to invest are protected. And with the strengthening of our institutions, we will ensure that surely their rights are not violated as the investors who've come to boost our economy.
Foreign Minister Moyo.
Thank you very much for your question. We were involved in the DRC. The President Kabila called us for help. At the same time, we were facing economic crisis at that point. So we had to find means to finance the operation. We wanted to help our brothers.
So you stole diamonds in the DRC to finance the operation. No, that's what you suggested.
Let me answer. We were facing an economic crisis in Zimbabwe. But at the same time, we were trying to respond to the call of President Kabila to help protect the sovereignty of the brothers and sisters in the DRC. So in order to finance our military operation, we set up a company, the Coast Leg, to trade diamond in order to finance the military operation. Once the military operation was over, we dissolved the company. The money that we got from the operation of that company was only to finance our operation, nothing else. Not a single penny went into my pocket.
Yeah, but with the new economic situation, you're going to disband the Zambia Diamond Consolidated Company. And that was set up by the G40 to stop the military and senior politicians enjoying the diamond wealth with the Chinese.
I think we are coming up with a diamond policy. We are trying to set up the institution. You know, one of our problems was governance structures. So we are coming up with a diamond policy, and we are seeking the help of Botswana to help us to polish our diamond so that we can have higher prices at auction.
Yes.
Dorcas Guata from Zimbabwe. Grace, I'm too angry with you to even put a question to you. The trauma that you caused in our nation will take generations to repeal. My question is to President Mnangagwa. There's a question about how we become Zimbabweans again after so much trauma. And there are questions about whether we need to apologize for the Gukurahundi genocide that happened in Matabeleland. Is that a discussion that you're prepared to have? And I'll ask actually about your competency to handle that kind of question within yourself. And the last question is around the NGO community that I work in. As you say Zimbabwe is open for business, are you aware that there are allegations of people who might come into Zimbabwe through the back door, pretending to be businessmen and women, only to abuse our vulnerable groups, such as the allegations we're hearing from the Oxfam community?
President Mnangagwa.
Well, thank you. In regards to the massacre in Matabeleland, there are things that are being done at the moment. I have put a commission in place to look into that matter. In January this year, we set up we actually put up the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission to look into the matter. And whatever the commission will come up with is what we'll respond to as the government. At this point, there isn't much I can do in my capacity in regard to that. About the situation that you're worried about, that maybe outsiders will come into Zimbabwe and take advantage once again, we are planning to strengthen all the institutions that are already in existence and make sure that the rule of law is supreme, such that nobody is taken advantage of, neither Zimbabweans nor the outsiders who are coming in to invest. So I can promise you that everybody will be safe, and whoever dares to go against the rule of law will face the consequences, regardless of whether they're Zimbabweans or not.
Foreign Minister Moyo.
We have set up the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission. It's an independent body. It will listen to and investigate any grievances of Zimbabweans, regardless of conflicts that occurred during our history. So we also have a minister for national reconciliation. So the commission is independent. It will investigate and will present report to our parliament.
Yeah, but
and also propose policies to promote national unity and reconciliation.
Foreign Minister, what's different? Because the ZANU-PF that you represent has never kept its promises over the years. What's going to change now? Are you going to keep all these promises you're making?
Definitely. We are showing it already. We promise that we will organize free and fair election. Okay? And we are setting up the institution. We are giving the Zimbabwean Electoral Commission the necessary means to organize free and fair election. Right now, they are registering the voters to ensure that there is no fraud during the next election. I can promise you that on behalf of our government, that the next election will be free and fair election.
No, but the head of the Veterans Association is always suggesting that the soldiers will be involved in the elections, which means that you're going to use intimidatory tactics that the military used in 2008.
Our soldiers will be involved in maintaining peace and security in Zimbabwe. We will not, the soldiers will not be involved directly with the election, apart from maintaining peace and security. It's like anywhere else in the world.
Yes.
My name is Ngozi Bekeme from Nigeria. I would like to know, Mr. President, sir, from your body language, you seem a bit uncomfortable in the position you are in. Is it because it's probably not a good idea to have a disagreement with your boss, and then the next thing you do is to go behind his back and take his position? Do you think you've set the right precedent in your country for colluding with the military to take over power? So that's my question for you. For Madam Grace, the former First Lady, the information and feedback about you is overwhelmingly negative. Can you tell us one thing that you did right or you did well for the people of your country that even your enemies would agree on?
President Mnangagwa.
First of all, my body language or demeanor has nothing to do with what happened in Zimbabwe a few months ago. Secondly, what happened was a decision that was taken by the ZANU-PF party. It wasn't up to me to exalt myself above everybody else and take the position. We were salvaging the party. We had a few elements, anti-revolutionaries, that we're trying to tear the party from within, and we could not allow that to happen. And with all respect to my former president, who also happens to be my mentor, he was not in position to run the party as per our ideals that we expected him to. And therefore, it was necessary for somebody to take over. And I was nominated by my fellow party members. As it is, I was the one who was next in line. It's just that we had to do it sooner because we were trying to prevent a situation that would have led the country into unnecessary violence.
Grace Mugabe.
Thank you very much. I think you would agree with me that being a woman in Africa is very hard, being in the limelight, and hence you would get all kind of things thrown at you. And that is why you've not had anything positive about me. And I also live a very low-key life. You would be surprised that I run an orphanage for over 1,000 kids, whom I feed and school. And I have a particular focus for kids who are physically and sexually abused. And so I think that is a great achievement on my part to the people of Zimbabwe. I also engage periodically with disabled people in Zimbabwe, doing my own part in helping them realize their goals. Thank you.
Low-key life, but you ended up fighting in the hotel in Johannesburg.
Well, Mr. Chair, I would say that was an act of self-defense on my part. This lady wanted to stab me with a knife for seeing my sons, Rob and Chatunga. I had to defend myself. And if we go before any court of law, I do have a rightful defense. She actually had a knife and planned to stab me with it.
But you never said that until now.
Well, like I said, I live a very low-key life.
Oh, but fighting in a hotel is not low-key. Yes. Sorry.
Mr. Mnangagwa, I'm happy because I can see you face to face today, not on the TV. And I'm from Ivory Coast. I'm from Cote d'Ivoire. My name is Leah. We got another Mnangagwa in Ivory Coast right now. Because you're changing your sport to be a Democrat. You are not. Because you were part of Mugabe rule. You were aware of the in and out. So now you are telling me that you are creating a commission to look into the massacre in Zimbabwe. How do you want me to trust you if you were part of it? So I need some reassurance from you. I am Ivorian, but first of all, I am African. Thank you.
Yes.
I would like to reiterate that this is a new regime. This is a new era. We are coming in with a lot of changes, one of which is to assure the people of Zimbabwe, as well as fellow Africans, that Zimbabwe is open for all of us. And nobody will be shut out this time. Secondly, we have this commission that you probably have your doubts about. We have our trust in it because it is an independent commission that is supposed to look into these issues. And as far as we are concerned, whatever recommendations they come up with, we shall follow through and see how well we can implement them. And I think it is too early for you to be worried about my administration. I've only been in office for less than 3 months, so at least give us the benefit of the doubt and see us do the kind of work that we have said we're going to do.
Now, but you promised that within 100 days, March 28, a lot of things would have been done. How far has that been going?
Surely, Mr. Moderator. What can you do within a short period as this?
You made the promise.
Exactly, but I have done a lot of things so far. One is setting up of the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission. Secondly, to ensure that government expenditures are curtailed, I have reduced the cabinet from 33 ministers to 22 ministers with only 6 deputy ministers. I have tried to make sure that I have an open forum for the youth to come and have a discourse with us. As far as I'm concerned, Mr. Moderator, we are doing very well at this juncture.
Yes.
Good morning. My name is Iris Mosolo. I'm from Botswana. And this is for the president here. A few days ago, you were quoted saying that you will, land will not be returned to the white farmers. But this is after Robert Smart was given back his land that he had been evicted from a few months ago. What do you say to the Zimbabweans about this? How do you clear this? Are the white farmers going to be given back the land or not?
Well, our stand on the issue of land is very clear here. We are not making changes to the land reforms that were adopted. First of all, land, the issue of the land was one of the main reasons we went into the bush to fight for liberation. And giving back land to the people who owned it would just be a betrayal to the people who fought for this liberation. And to assure you that nobody will be cheated of whatever they have in terms of land, so far we have policies, land reforms that are already in place. We have relaxed the laws as regards to who should own the land, and we also have the Land Commission to deal with the rest of it. I cannot say all of it on this forum.
Yes.
My President, I am an ordinary Zimbabwean and I am not impressed by your stance today. Your foreign minister in his opening remarks spoke about the human security issues that prompted your takeover in November from former President Robert Mugabe. I want to know what practical steps have been taken in order to rectify or, in your words, restore a legacy that you were part of, destroying, a legacy of progression, a legacy of growth. How do you practically, to the ordinary Zimbabwean person, address the issues of the health sector, healthcare issues? Your wife has been spotted on various occasions going to hospitals, being tested, making appearances, but no practical steps have been taken into changing or further funding the healthcare system. For instance, if you look at your budget that was set in by your by your financial minister, Mr. Chinamasa, the budget for your military far exceeds that for education and that for healthcare. How do you explain these things? How do you explain this to the ordinary Zimbabwean? I just want to know.
Yes, President Mnangagwa.
Well, like I said during my inauguration speech, my administration and I will have a zero tolerance policy towards corruption. And one of the reasons these institutions haven't been working is because of the high level of corruption that had infiltrated these institutions. For them to be able to work properly, we will have to make sure that the institutions themselves are strengthened, we have enough personnel, and we intend to make sure that these healthcare systems function, because sincerely our people cannot keep going out of the country to get medical support, medical help from outside countries. And that is why the budget for our health should obviously be higher than that of the education. So I think that I might not even be an expert in that regard, but my Minister of Finance can speak more to that.
Yes.
Madam Grace, our former First Lady, I'm so happy to meet you. And I want to seize this opportunity to commend your husband for rescuing us from the hands of the colonialists that have taken over our lands. You are not perfect, and your administration was not perfect. You spent so long time in office, but at least we're happy. I'm one of your die-hard loyalists, and I know that you served us to the best of your ability. But, you're out of office now, and you have done your bit, so enjoy your retirement. Minister of Foreign Affairs, I don't see how you will convince me that you didn't plan a coup against our former leader. You executed a well-mapped out coup, and here you are being compensated with the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Trade. What are you going to do differently from what you have been doing? Because it's like same old, and you are here to tell us all sorts of things. Mr. Mnangagwa, Mr. Crocodile, we know you. We know what you have been capable of all along. And here you are, 75-year-old. You still want to run for president. What does your future as president hold for an average Zimbabwean? I know that if you run for office and win, everything is going to change and you're going to come up with a true color. So can you tell us what the future holds for younger generation if at 75 you still want to be president for several years? Thank you.
Foreign Minister Moyo. Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. At this point, my name is irrelevant because I come from a town where you were very instrumental at wiping off sometime in 1983 during the Malalele lands massacre, where about 10,000 Zimbabweans lost their lives. Then you were the head of the State Secret Service. I would like to ask you what moral rights you have to pose yourself before the world as Zimbabwe's leader. And considering that Zimbabwe has been very much aligned with rogue regimes like North Korea, who is known to have trained your very brutal army, what kind of relationship should the international community expect from Zimbabwe's partnerships with rogue nations going forward? Thank you.
One last question.
Yes.
Mine's a bit of a cheeky question for the foreign minister. The Kukuruhundi that has been discussed very much here, the person who managed the day-to-day operations of the Kukuruhundi was the now president, Mr. Mnangagwa. And Kukuruhundi targeted Zipra and Zapu, ZANU's rival in the 1970s Liberation War. You were a member of Zipra and Zapu, arrested, tortured in the 1980s under the auspices of Mr. Mnangagwa. How did you two make up?
Foreign Minister Moyo.
Thank you for your questions. I think when it comes to the future of Zimbabwe, we can forget our old clashes. This is very important. The future of Zimbabwe is more important than anything else. Concerning the coup, the so-called coup, it was not a coup d'etat, as I said previously. The party that was elected before the transition is still in power of the transition. So how can we talk about it in terms of a coup when the same party is in power? Rather, we should look at what happened within the ZANU-PF. Now, as foreign minister, I don't think that this is a reward or whatever. At the heart of my career, human security actually is at the heart of my career. Whether I work in the military, or whether I am the Minister of Foreign Affairs, except that the means are different. Now, as Minister of Foreign Affairs, I have to show the world that we are opening our doors for them. We have to show that we will do things very differently. I have to show that we are very serious about democracy. I have to show that we are very serious about human rights in Zimbabwe, about democracy in Zimbabwe. It's important also not only to engage with countries on our continent, we have to learn from what they did. We have to learn from the successes from their successors. For example, we are learning from Botswana. We are learning from their diamond policy that we will try to make for our own country. We also are interacting with our diaspora. We have 5 million Zimbabweans today who are living abroad in South Africa, in the EU, and the US. And we want to invite them to be part of our economic miracle, our forthcoming economic miracle. Already today, the diaspora provides about $2 billion each year to Zimbabwe. And I am sure that there are investors within the diaspora who would like to invest in the Zimbabwean economy, and they will also like to share their skills with fellow Zimbabweans. Thank you.
And of course, he's got a PhD in international relations. Yes.
Well, somebody asked me about the future of the Zimbabwean youth. I would like to inform you, just in case you did not know, that right now we have a policy to increase jobs and job opportunities for the young people. Politically, we have decided that in the coming few months we're going to hold elections. And this is open for everybody, young, old, women, everybody. It is not restricted to older people. For sure, if you think we no longer deserve to be in office, this is your opportunity to choose who you want to put in office. Secondly, we have tried to bring the youth up. Even within our party as the ZANU-PF, we have a youth wing that has its own activities, and surely it is my belief that it's only a matter of time before they rise up to the higher ranks.
Okay, thank you very much. We will now have a closing statement, starting with Grace Mugabe.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. It is with pleasure that I participated in this panel. I want to highlight that Zimbabweans are peace-loving and resilient, and we shall pass through this cloudy period where people entrusted with the protection of our state have taken over in what I would call borderline treasonable. However, I am confident that I still have the support of Zimbabweans, and my plans will soon be unraveled. Thank you.
President Mnangagwa.
Thank you very much. My appeal is to the people of Zimbabwe. I would like to ask you to give us your support, work with us, see what we can do. We do acknowledge that there is a lot to be done within the few days, and we did make a commitment to achieve some of these goals in the first 100 days. And as our top priorities, we have the economic recovery and democratization of the system. And it is my belief that we shall achieve this regardless of the odds that are against us. All I'm asking for is your support. I know you are a resilient population. You've survived all these years. Give us that support to continue making sure that we deliver as per the promises we've made. Thank you.
Foreign Minister Moyo.
Thank you very much. It will take some time before we can make a more perceptible change in human lives. Let me say that this is a new era. It is a start of a new democracy. It is a new era of openness. It is a new era of tolerance. It is a new era of mutual respect. The former president brought political liberation. This government will bring economic liberation. I'm very confident that Zimbabwe will bring the word miracle to the African continent. Zimbabwe will be Africa's economic miracle. We are opening our doors. We invite the international community to be part of our economic miracle. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
That was really, really good. It's quite hard to be in somebody else's shoes, but you did an excellent job. So without further ado, I'll invite the next panel to join. And there's some water and tea and coffee if you want to quickly grab some and come back.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Maybe water.
Yes.
No, I'm fine.
Who starts first?
Hmm?
Who starts first?
You will start. You're the president.
Oh. Ugh. How you doing? We can do this.
You're so far from me.
Al-Sarraj, the head of the UN-backed government, of Scholar Fellow, Mamelo from South Africa. Wave. We have the Nigerian President, Muhammad Buhari, the Women Fellow, Sukaina from Morocco, and an AU representative, also a Scholar Fellow, Kolosa from South Africa.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The images of Africans being sold in Libya galvanized not just Africa, but the rest of the world to take action. And Africans themselves are wondering why this sort of thing should be happening in the 21st century. So to discuss this depressing situation, we have a panel consisting of the Prime Minister, Farad Al-Sarraj, who heads the Government of National Accord, President Buhari of Nigeria, and the African Union Commissioner for Peace and Security, Ismail Shagui. We will start with opening statements from President Buhari.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. It's no secret that hundreds of African refugees and migrants passing through Libya are bought and sold like goats in modern-day slave markets. It's shameful and it's dehumanizing. The trade works by preying on the tens of thousands of vulnerable youth and people who risk everything to get to Libya's coast and then cross the Mediterranean to Europe, a route that has been described as the deadliest route on earth. My administration is very committed to this cause, and we would do everything possible to make the country conducive to discourage youth from embarking on the journey and risking their lives. Our major concern is to keep our young people in Nigeria. Thank you.
Prime Minister Al-Sarraj.
Good afternoon. It is with dismay that the Libyan government received the news of slave auctions operating in Libya. These acts in no way reflect our values, and we consider them a blight on our national conscience. We have thus established a committee to investigate the extent of the slave trade and those involved in it. Moreover, we are aware of the broader geopolitical implications and impacts of these auctions. We thus welcome the assistance of the European Union, the United Nations, and the African Union in addressing slavery and migration.
Ambassador Ismail Shagui.
Good afternoon, His Excellency President Buhari, Prime Minister Al-Sarraj, the audience, all protocol observed. The African Union would like to express its deep outrage and its concern at the current situation happening in Libya. Therefore, the African Union, together with the European Union and the United Nations, has decided to form a partnership to respond to this crisis. With that being said, there is a 3-point emergency plan that has been put in place, which includes the creation of a joint task force. It includes the launch of an urgent operation to evacuate migrants from the situation and the formation of an AU Commission of Inquiry to get to the root causes of this crisis. I thank you.
Ambassador Shagui, last year the African Union declared 2017 as the year of the African youth. Isn't it then ironic to see this sort of situation in Libya involving young people from Africa?
The situation is a sad and dire situation, but I think the fact that last year was the year for youth in Africa but by the AU shows how forward-looking the AU is. It shows that we are interested in the youth of the continent, and we know that 60% of the African continent is made up of young people under the age of 25, and we are looking into investing economically into these people, into including them in processes of the economy of their respectful countries, and we are working closely with all our member states to ensure that that happens.
President Buhari, Nigeria is a very rich country. Why should young people live in the country in droves? Last year, 37,000 of them went to Europe illegally, behind Iraq and Syria. Why should this be happening in a rich country like Nigeria?
Thank you. We don't want to see our daughters and sons dying in the Mediterranean. It's painful. It's our sons and our daughters. However, the majority of the people dying in the Mediterranean and embarking on Libya's journey, they didn't decide to go to Libya. Most of them were smuggled. And we are doing our best. We are providing our young people in Nigeria with opportunities to shine, with spaces where they can express themselves, with initiatives where youth people are the center. Because we need them and we want them to stay in their country because they are the real capital. Yes, we are a rich country. We do have oil, but youth are the real capital of Nigeria, and we count on them and we count on their cooperation.
Oh yes, Prime Minister Al-Sarraj, what is your faction of the government in Libya doing about the situation? I mean, have you got the capacity to deal with the problem in the east of Libya, in Tobruk?
Right now, our government is backed by the UN, and we are working closely with the UN High Commissioner for Refugees. In fact, we have managed to rescue 1,000 refugees who were extremely vulnerable just this week. We are also leading a committee to investigate the extent of these rights abuses, and we will do our best within our capacities and working alongside the UN and other NGOs who are invested in this matter.
Yes, President Buhari, Nigerians have a reputation of stashing money abroad. I mean, that's one of the major problems of poverty in Nigeria. And don't you agree with that? They send money abroad to Europe and America, which should be there to help young Nigerians get jobs and education. How are you going to tackle that? Because you are now the corruption champion of the African Union.
Wait, since I became
anti-corruption champion.
Yes.
Of the
Since I
African
became
Union.
president of Nigeria, I have been a fierce fighter against corruption. I strongly believe that corruption is a cancer which must be fought with all the weapons at our disposal. Corruption corrodes the very fabric of the government and it literally destroys the society. Fighting corruption is key, not only to restore the moral health of the nation, but also to freeing, as you said, our enormous resources for urgent socio-economic development in our country.
But if you're in and out of the country because of your health, the last time you were away for 100 days and no one knew what you were doing, how can you actually take charge of this enormous fight against corruption?
Let me just finish one thing. Since you know that the UK government has introduced a new initiative to help nations like us to fight.
Yes, the unexplained wealth order.
Exactly. So we support the British government, and we salute them for this initiative. However, I would love to see the British government as a model to follow, and I would love them to start by, as I said, by being an example to other nations in Africa. Why? Because I would like to seize this opportunity to ask the British government, since they are now trying to start a new era and start a new page, to send back the money they stole from Nigeria, the billions of dollars.
Who stole the money? Nigerians were accused of sending the money abroad.
Yes, but I think that it has to be both ways. Because these things happen in first world countries too.
Yes, madam.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. It's amazing that 3 African leaders are sitting at that table and waxing lyrical about their love for the young people of their countries. Did your eyes just open to the suffering of your young people because you saw the reality of what they have experienced in Libya? Why did it take the AU so long? Can Ambassador Shagi tell us what exactly it is that the African Year of Youth means? What did you do? And how has a lot of the young people of Africa, of the youth of Africa, changed as a result of your wanting declarations about Year of Youth? Meaningless declarations, in fact. And how is it that this leader of Libya is suddenly regretting that this kind of thing happened under your watch? Why has it taken you? Why is it because you were discovered that you suddenly realized that this is a very sad thing that happened? Has it not been in the modus operandi of your country for some time to watch populations discriminate against people from other parts of Africa? I think you should all wake up to the reality of the times. You have been found out. Nigeria has perhaps the largest population of young people under the age of 25 or so. What is President Buhari saying about how you respect what the UK has done? You should be providing leadership for Africa and Africans. You've done none of that. Your war against corruption has gone nowhere. This corruption that has reduced the plight of young people to what it is. Why have you not prioritized this in any case, in any of your work? You've chased people around. There's nobody in jail for corruption. Perhaps you're trying to relegate young people to the 3rd bedroom in your house. Thank you.
Yes, we'll start with Ambassador Smile Chegi. Why hasn't the African Union done more?
Thank you for that question. I do, however, think that it's an incorrect assessment of the work of the African Union regarding our youth. As last year was the year for youth and accelerated inclusive growth of the youth, this has seen involving the youth. This has seen the African Union involving its youth in fields of employment. It has seen the African Union training the youth with civil society organizations and government organizations in their country to make sure that they are fully capable of this. And as I say that, I would like to urge member states in the audience to sign and rectify the African Youth Charter so that we can work more seamlessly with them, and to also remind you that we have Agenda 2063, which sees the African Union building on their previous policies that we have had in the previous years and implementing these correctly. And please do take into consideration that we deal with a variety of member states on the continent, some coming out of conflict, some having been out of conflict for longer, and engaging these different member states takes time. And I ask you to be cognizant of that and the work we are doing in making sure that we are implementing the policies that we have.
Respect, this is a lot of English that you're speaking here. Why don't you admit that you have no control over those member states as the African Union, and that actually what you do in Addis is generate those papers, those policies to placate all of these people, and you are achieving nothing. Agenda 2063, when Agenda 2018 has not even been resolved. I'm sorry.
Yes, can you just answer that before?
Thank you, Chair. The member of the audience seems to have her own agenda, but I will reiterate that the African Union is still on its path to achieving greater unity within the continent in cooperating with its international partners, as I spoke of them in my introduction, and with a special focus on the youth. And if anything, the crisis in Libya has given us greater impetus to encourage our youth, which we see as more than just human capital, but lives that matter to us as a continental body.
But this has been going on in Libya since 2011. You haven't done anything, the African Union.
We have been working very closely, I'm sure Prime Minister will attest to that. We've been working very closely with Libya for years. Libya is an important partner of the African Union, and just because the eyes of the world choose to only report certain things does not mean that nothing has been happening on the ground.
Yes, President Buhari, the question.
Young lady, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised because it's much easier to talk. But my achievements and my facts speak louder than your words. Despite, just like to name few, despite global economic challenges, the Nigerian economy trumped predictions and witnessed some remarkable changes in 2017. The food and agriculture organizations and other multilateral organizations like the World Bank and the IMF have also witnessed that we've gone so far this year. Just to give you an example, the price of 50 kilos of rice, a staple in our country, Nigeria, has fallen by about 30%.
How many of your young people can afford that 50 kilos bag of rice?
We
Why
are
they voting with their feet to go to Libya in order to cross to Europe? Mr.
Against all odds, 2017, whether you accept it or not, 2017 has turned out to be an agricultural revolution in Nigeria.
How many of those farms are owned by young people? How many? Just tell me how many people are employed and are owners of farms. Mr. President, don't look in your book, just tell me.
Yes. Yes, President Buhari, yes.
Mr. Moderator, could you please do your job?
Yes. They have to,
moderate.
They have to ask the questions.
This is not acceptable.
No, it is acceptable.
One last thing. After 43 years of Al-Qaddafi regime, you know that most of the Nigerians stuck now in Nigeria, they didn't start their journey from Nigeria. They were already there. Why? Because for 43 years, Muammar al-Qaddafi was recruiting people and young people from Nigeria, from the Sahel and other African countries. All they learned was how to shoot and kill. They didn't learn how to be plumbers. They didn't learn how to become electricians. So when the people in Libya stood against their regime and al-Qaddafi, all those who were considered as not Libyans, or all those who were considered by the Libyans as not their people, they had to leave the country. Literally, they were chased out.
But Prime Minister,
some of them, please, let me finish. Some of them went back to Nigeria with their workers, but others, especially those, and the majority of them, as I said earlier, who only learned how to kill and shoot, they went back to Nigeria and joined Boko Haram and became fighters in Boko Haram.
Prime Minister Al-Sarraj, is that the case?
We do not know of these reports that Buhari speaks of. And we would like to dismiss all notions by Madame there at the back who would like to suggest that Libya is a racist country. We are not racist in Libya. We love Africa and we love African people. For years, Africans have worked in our country. If there are incidents of racism, these are individualized and they're in no way institutionalized. In our institutions, we have fought against racism and improving the conditions in detention centers to make sure.
Yes,
to,
can I ask a question?
Are you through? Are you through, Prime Minister?
How we've condoned it. We have never condoned slavery. As soon as we heard the reports of slavery, we convinced the committee to investigate the extent of it. And we've been working closely with the UN to take back all the people who have been wrongfully enslaved to their home countries, and the most vulnerable have been repatriated to Italy under our urging that Italy and other European Union countries ease the way for legal migration to happen.
Yeah, no, yes.
Sorry,
a question here.
Can I just ask a question? Thank you.
Yes.
Every time an African leader gets on a plane and accesses healthcare in Singapore, France, Britain, wherever they do, they make it fashionable to leave the continent and access healthcare elsewhere. It negatively incentivizes our youth to think the grass is greener elsewhere. How many days Mugabe spent, Buhari spent, my goodness, the budget would be shocking if we had that bill. How is the African institution pulling these leaders in? As an institution, you have clout. Are you executing your power and pulling these guys in? And last question, are we likely to see a female leader in Nigeria in our lifetime?
Ambassador Shigui.
Thank you for that question. I would like to let you know that the African Union does have bodies in place to hold leaders accountable. But with that said, 2018 is the African Union's year of anti-corruption, and this is towards a sustainable transformation of not only the African continent, but its leaders. So I acknowledge your concerns about the leaders of the continent and can assure you that we will tighten the ropes around keeping them accountable, not only to their respective countries, but to us as a continental body, so that they can lead, so that they can be exemplary leaders. Thank you.
President Buhari, about a female leader
thank you.
in Nigeria.
Thank you very much. I join my voice to yours, and yes, I would love to see a female in a high political position in Africa, whether in Nigeria or in any other African country. In Nigeria, boosting education, and especially educating young girls, is a direct counterbalance to militant groups like Boko Haram, to poverty, or to migration. So we do believe in the power of education. Our young girls need to be empowered so they can be full citizens of their country and participate in the development of their community and their nations. And just to give you a proof, I'm here in London because I was so delighted to accept an invitation from my very good friend, Prof. Fumi, who happens to be Nigerian. She's a woman, and she's a founder and a leader of an initiative that all Nigerians had to be proud of. I'm so glad and I'm so honored to be here to support her and support her initiatives and what she's doing and what she has been doing for African women for more than 10 years.
Yes, but President Buhari, will you use the opportunity to go for further medical checks while you're here?
Okay, so thank you very much for asking this question. Okay, as you can see, I'm alive, I'm healthy, and I'm very happy to answer your questions.
Yes.
Let me just finish. I would like to answer your questions about my medical checkups and why I come to
London.
London. I have always been a direct person, and I will answer your question in the most direct way possible. As I said earlier and in other interviews, I'm a human. I'm not 21 anymore. And when Nigerians voted for me, and when they chose me, and when they wanted me to be their president, they knew I was 73.
Well, they didn't know you. They didn't know you were ill.
I have to do medical checkups regularly, and when I do this, I do it and when I do this, I do it as part of my annual leave. And even when I'm in London, I always make sure that all my doctors and nurses are Nigerians.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes, yes, please.
Mr. President.
Yes, yes.
Mr. President, I heard you saying
yes,
that you trust in the power of education. Now, what about these costs of this education? Not just setting up schools, the consequences of education. You know, I live in the middle of the Mediterranean, halfway between Africa and Europe, mainland. And sometimes when we walk at the beach, we find these little shoes from children, which we sometimes suspect they come from one of these wreckages that are drowning around us. It's not a good feeling. So I will tell you what we believe on the other side of the water, why these people get on this road. When I walk in an African city today, about midday, 2 out of 3 persons in the streets wear school uniforms. We know that in 5 to 10 years, all of them will need jobs. They will not have jobs, but they will become troublesome because they are young and they are strong and they are daring and adventurous. The only good and easy way to get rid of them is to let them pass through the Sahara and go to Europe, because they could jeopardize your power of your regimes. If these many, then 3 out of 4, then 4 out of 5 young people in your nations get angry. This is a wonderful valve who will get them on a dangerous road and exploit their adventures. The education that you equip them with is just good enough to let them understand that they have to leave your country. Thank you.
President Buhari, what do you say to that, actually?
Okay, thank you for your question. First of all, the right to move is a human right. And if young Nigerians decide to move out of their country, it's their right. How many Europeans we have in Africa? Why did they leave their countries? If Europe is a symbol of development, why are they leaving Europe to come and look for better opportunities in Africa?
Mm-hmm.
Is it Europe? Doesn't Europe always brag about having the best educational systems in the world? So why do we have thousands of Europeans coming to Nigeria looking for jobs?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I have a question for all three. The African Union, do you have a plan in place to ensure that the AU is financially sustainable going forward? Considering the fact that you allowed the Chinese to build your secretariat, and it turns out that they bogged your secretariat. So how do you make sure that going forward you are not outsourcing some of the things that are supposed to be paying for yourselves? President Buhari, It seems as if you have some issues with your inner circle, because even your wife is a loud critic of some of the people around you, and that has a direct link with how people communicate or talk about your administration. Because many Nigerians know that you have done a lot in terms of improving the internally generated revenue of the country. Your investment in agriculture and the solid minerals industry has greatly reduced our dependence on oil. But how come these positive elements are not coming out of your administration? All we hear is how much control the cabal has over you, and again, your wife, who you refer to as belonging to the other room. So I'm actually quite happy that you are interested in the leadership of women, but maybe you'd want to comment about that. And the Prime Minister from Libya, I think you really do need to talk to us some more about racism in Libyan society and the attitude of the average Libyan towards their brothers and sisters from other parts of Africa, especially those who are darker skinned than they are. Because you have not convinced us so far that racism is not embedded in the way you do business in your country. So we need to know more from you about that.
Smile, Shegu.
Thank you for that question. I would like to assure you that the AU has its financial department fully in place and capable to ensure that investments into the AU will be used well over the next few years. And with regards to China, I would just like to say that the African Union and China have a relationship of respect and stability. With that being said, we function professionally, and the Chinese and the African Union have an unwavering respect of professionalism, and we use this to drive the African continent forward. However, if you do want to find out about African Union and China relations, there is a meeting in the margins of this conference where you can come and we can let you know more about our relations with China.
President Buhari.
Thank you very much for your question. As far as the Constitution allows me, I will try to ensure that there is responsible and accountable governance at all levels of governments in the country. As I said, I've been fighting corruption since I became president of Nigeria. And I will not have kept my trust with the Nigerian people if I allow others to abuse theirs under my watch. So, as you said, my wife was one of the biggest critics of some of the people in my administration. I've always been an active listener. I always take into consideration what people say and try to act accordingly. And just to give you an example, when I was in London a few months ago for a routine checkup, there was this group of young people, and it's a movement called Our Mumu Dono. Yes. So they were spending the whole day singing the national anthem in front of my house here in London. And they asked me to go back to Nigeria or to resign. And guess what? I flew back the next day.
Why didn't you resign?
Because I take into consideration what the people need and what the people want. Because I'll tell you one thing, I think that I should be, and I am, a model to follow not only for Nigerian politicians, but for all politicians around Africa and the world. Why? Because I think that I manage to lead my country successfully, whether I'm in Nigeria or not. I manage to serve my people when I'm sick and when I'm not. Thank you.
Prime Minister Al-Sarraj.
As we've said, all these allegations that Libya is a racist country are smear campaigns. We are not racist in any way. In fact, a part of Libya's population are darker-skinned people in Libya's south. We have never discriminated against them, and we will never do that. We love our African brothers and sisters, and we show this through our commitment to the African Union. We will continue to work against these spoilers in our community who act upon such racism and enslave people from the African continent. This racism is individualized, and in no way is it institutionalized or widespread throughout Libya. Most Libyans are peace-loving people who are hoping for a peaceful transition and to have a safe country and to live in communion with the rest of Africa.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I traveled all the way from Cameroon to talk to President Buhari. I'm called Bakolo Kuma from Cameroon. Let me start with our Prime Minister Fayez from Libya. I think today maybe we are telling the globe that the King of Kings, the Imam of Imam, Gaddafi was right, because during the regime of Gaddafi, we didn't have this open market of slavery. But today, those who claim they were having an internal revolution, we now understand that it's a whole conspiracy against the person called Gaddafi. To that effect, would you agree with me that it wasn't an internal revolution, instead it was an internal conspiracy against somebody who loved his country, that is Gaddafi? That's the question asked to Prime Minister Fayez. President, I know your heart is not too balanced, but we are not going on the hard side, because here we are talking about immigration issues. There's something happening now between Nigeria and Cameroon. About 47 English-speaking Cameroonians have been extradited to Cameroon. And between Nigeria and Cameroon, there is no extradition law. Secondly, those 47 Cameroonians had earlier acquired a political asylum status. How do you explain this extradition from those who are running away from a country? Will they claim that particular country is actually suppressing their right, and you didn't see necessary to allow these people undergo a fair trial in your country before extraditing them? What will you say about this? Thank you.
President Buhari.
Thank you very much. This is a very, very interesting question. However, I would be more than happy to answer only questions related to the topic of the round table.
But human rights is a link to what's been happening, people leaving. If we don't respect human rights, you'll get young people leaving. So you have to answer the question.
I think that through various administrations, the federal government of Nigeria has demonstrated its commitment to tackling these kinds of issues, whether it's global human trafficking in Nigeria or in other African countries through the establishment of different initiatives. So I think that our concern is translated not only into words but into actions and tangible and concrete projects and programs. Just to give you an example, that in 2003, the government established what we call the National Agency for the Prohibition of Trafficking in Persons in 2003, as I said, and we have been taking this issue very seriously, and we've been trying to find long-lasting solutions, because we don't want to see this happening again in the future. And I think that absurd and unfair to blame or to take, that our administration takes the blame of the mistakes done by other administrations. You know that miracles cannot happen overnight. The destruction of the country took more than 16 years. So we cannot expect solutions to these issues in 3 or 4 or 5 years. The destruction took years, and I think that building and rebuilding the nation will take years too. Thank you.
Yes, Prime Minister Al-Sarraj.
On this day, 7 years ago, protests in Libya started against Muammar Gaddafi. Many Libyans took to the streets to protest against this authoritarian rule that was dividing the country. I find it shameful that today this man would stand here and denigrate the struggle and the sacrifices that our revolutionaries have made to fight for Libya's freedom, to fight for a democratic Libya. And it is to these revolutionaries that we have dedicated all peace processes between the Tobruk and the Tripoli government. The Libyan political agreement that we have signed and that we are committed to carrying out is dedicated to these very same revolutionaries. So shame, sir, for trying to denigrate those people who have fought so hard for Libya's peace. It is the youth who fought for the Libya's freedom. And
Yes.
it is them that I'm passionate about. They are one and the same, madam.
Yes.
Thank you so much for taking the time to come here out of your very, very busy schedule. I'll just go straight to...
And who are you?
I am, I'm Francis. I live in the UK. I'm English. My question, you just mentioned, Prime Minister, regarding the involvement of youths in the revolution of Libya. I have a question regarding the position of women in Libya despite their involvement in that revolution. Where are they now compared to where were they before the revolution actually took place? And also, President Buhari, you made a statement about time, that it takes time for change. I think the message that sends to myself and most people in this room is that African leaders think we don't understand as young people that it takes time for change. We do understand that it takes time for change, but one thing we don't understand, or one thing that we want, is to see consistency and gradual change. We don't expect to have a solution overnight, but when we see you spend more money in terms of private cars and Rolls Royce more than ambulance and hospital beds, that is the reason why we actually sit here even having this discussion. So we do understand that it takes time for change, but we just want consistency in seeing that there's a clear direction. Hopefully you can talk about that. Also, Ambassador for AU, you said that 2018 is going to be a year of accountability. My question is, who is going to keep who accountable? I have seen that you've had African Union meetings across the continent. Gambia was one of them. You had millions of dollars spent on Audis and BMWs, driving right across kids that are homeless and had no school to go to. I want to understand who is going to keep who accountable and what is the standard of leadership that the AU is ready to represent. And also, I want to understand, how are you going to sustain African Union? How are you going to sustain other individual states when your budget, when your planning is influenced by somebody else? I also want to understand, are we going to have our own definition of what development is? Is it fine cars, fine buildings, nice street lights? What is our own definition? I'd like to understand. Thank you.
President Buhari.
Yeah.
Yes, President
Another
Buhari.
question or not?
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Francis, for your question. It was not a question, it was a comment, and I totally agree with you. Yes, we need time, and we need consistency too. And I think that this is what we've been doing, successfully doing, since I became president of Nigeria. So I think I take this as a compliment more than a question or or a comment. And since you're British, and I have never like shied away from saying the truth or from accepting our challenges and problems. And let me just remind you, back in 2016, your former Prime Minister, Mr. Cameron, said that Nigeria is one of the countries that is fantastically corrupt. And in one of the interviews, I was asked if I'm demanding an apology from the British government. And I said that no, I'm not demanding an apology from the British government. Why? Because I agree with him. Yes, Nigeria is a country that is fantastically corrupt. But what I'm demanding is that the government of the UK brings back and sends back the money they stole from Nigeria. That's what we are demanding. Thank you very much.
Yes, Prime Minister Al-Sarraj.
Unfortunately, our government has not been fully able to institute gender mainstreaming, but with the help of the UN, we will try to get more representation for women in our government, and we will encourage the government in Tobruk to do the same.
Thank you for your question and comments, Francis. The AU is really passionate about and focused on developing country-specific strategies and tackling issues. And with that said, 2017 saw the AU focusing on the youth. And with that, we want to encourage leadership from the youth. And we have a quota system in place to ensure that the youth is represented in all systems of government. And you speak about who will hold the AU accountable. Well, we believe in the independence and integrity of the independent bodies that we are currently working with that will work closely with keeping the AU accountable. And in terms of investments, we have a lot of investments with European Union-based companies that will see the African Union using this money to drive the continent forward.
Yes, okay. Just last question.
I'm Tendai from Zimbabwe. I'm very interested in understanding how you're actually going to encourage youth participation. Are you thinking of instituting quotas for engagement in public service positions for the youth? Or is it still about creating these small youth councils and flaunting them to us and to say that you are trying to solve the problem of the youth? How concretely do you intend to address this problem of youth? How do you want to support young people? Thank you.
To answer that, I would say that inclusivity is our new focus. And by this, we do this by having internships within the African Union for youth, and this will see the youth shadowing current leaders and hopefully building them up for the next generation. And we as a continental body are looking for not only to be inclusive within the African Union, but for our member states to have policies that include young people in every area of their government and even in the private sector.
Yeah, one final question to President Buhari. It has taken the Nigerian government 20 years to recover the money stolen by General Abacha, which was in the Swiss bank. So how confident are you that you can recover stolen funds quicker than the Abacha saga?
I'm not confident, but I am very positive.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
Yes, that will,
yeah, okay. We will now have closing statements, starting with Ambassador Shigui.
The African Union is committed to securing a safe and peaceful African continent. With that said, we are fully behind the people of Libya into creating a society that is not only peaceful for them, but for all the other African nationals within the country. And the African Union will continue to work closely with its member states and Libya to ensure that this never occurs again.
President Buhari.
Nigeria would do everything possible to discourage youth from embarking on the journey and risking their lives. Our major problem, as we have identified, is still the security of the country. Finally, fixing security, as well as providing other critical infrastructure in Nigeria, would also reduce the chances of people taking the risk and ending up in the Mediterranean Sea. Efforts by our administration was already yielding positive results in different sectors, such as agriculture, economy, and education. And they were praised by different international organizations. Thank you.
Prime Minister Al-Sarraj.
The Libyan government would like to reiterate that we are dismayed at the slave auctions operating in Libya. Libya is not a racist country, and these acts in no way reflect our values. We have thus established a committee to investigate the extent of the slave trade and those involved in it. We will continue to work with the European Union, the United Nations, and the African Union to address this problem. Thank you.
Members of the panel, thank you very much. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. I want to thank Desmond for all the support and all the practice simulation. There's lunch served, so you're all welcome to join us for lunch and interact with
the president.